First, let's start off with what is a high ability student?
A high ability student is someone who in a normal classroom excels, really probably doesn't have to put in much work to do straight A level work. So it's somebody who has the ability to perform at a very high level compared to the other children in their grade level.
And what is the situation for students who are high ability in Indiana?
Well, in the most recent Kids Count in Indiana data book, we found that there are about 141,000 high ability students have been identified in the state of Indiana. That's up from about 106,000 in 2007. So we're seeing an increase in the number of high ability students. There really probably is not an increase so much in that it's an increase in that these students are being identified. Back in 2007, a new law was instituted that said that school districts must identify high ability students. Up until that point, it was that they had the option as to whether to identify them or not. So once that legislation went into place and school districts were charged with ensuring they found high ability students in their midst, those numbers have started to creep up. It's very important that we challenge high ability students. If these students aren't properly challenged, they're not likely to excel at the level that they could when they're put into these high ability programs.
So how are schools now finding these high ability students?
They do it through a variety of testing. Much of it has to do with looking at critical thinking skills and really being able to see how you can problem solve at a high ability level. And so school districts run these tests, and then when they find what high ability students are in their midst, they make sure that they gear a curriculum toward those students that encourages them to use all the gifts that they have to succeed at a very high level across a broad range of subjects.
And these tests, they not only test for performance, they also test for potential. Why is that important?
Well, it's important because it could be that some of these students are just being hidden by their circumstances. For instance, children who grow up in low-income neighborhoods may not have as many educational opportunities as their peers who grow up in high-income neighborhoods. So sometimes it may be a little bit more difficult. Some of these children maybe don't have the social skills or some of the other skills yet developed that would really show their excellence or their high ability. So it's kind of masked. So it could be that you see a student who has some potential, but they need some work in some areas to be able to catch up. Another place this holds true is with students who are English language learners. They may be high ability students, but because they don't speak English well or at all yet, their lack of ability to communicate with the teachers in the schools may be hiding the fact that these students are high ability. So it really, our teachers and schools really have to look at not only those students who are performing extremely well, but those students who look like they have potential to perform extremely well, given some other supports.
What about children who have learning disabilities? That could mask the high ability too.
Actually, learning disabilities are one of the many ways that will mask a high ability student. Oftentimes students are extremely intelligent, but aren't able to communicate or perform on tests in the same way that students without a learning disability. Some of the more common places where you find students who are high ability but perhaps have a learning disability are on the autism spectrum and also with students who have dyslexia. So it's very important that not only the learning disability be identified, but the child be identified as high ability so that both of those aspects of that child's life can be dealt with in the school environment.
And how do teachers then deal with those types of students that are high ability?
Well, they change curriculum a little bit, and school districts are prepared for that. School districts actually have somebody on their staff to try to train and work with the teachers who are going to be working with the high ability students in their classrooms. They make sure they have a curriculum that is more challenging than what other students are getting. A lot of that is based around what we talked about earlier, these critical thinking skills, and perhaps a little bit more of problem solving or hands-on work than students who are not identified as high ability would have. So that actually also has benefits for other students as well. It's not just the high ability students who get the benefit of that, because teachers will tell you, once I start working with those high ability students, I begin to see ways to incorporate those same sort of lessons into the students who are not high ability. So all students actually benefit when schools find out there are high ability students in their midst.
And how can parents start to work with their high ability student?
Well, this can be a challenge because oftentimes a high ability student may possess academic skills that are greater than the parents. So it's really trying to make sure that you get your child identified at school, that you make sure your child is enrolled in those programs, and then also trying to just reach out and find resources that may help you with your child. For instance, you could have a very young child who reads at a very high level. And oftentimes that's a challenge because getting a child who's in a lower grade, say third grade, who reads at a 10th grade level, what people are reading at a 10th grade level may not be appropriate for that child from a developmental aspect. So this is one of the great challenges of dealing with high ability students. So there are resources out there. You can contact your school to try to find those reading material, for instance, that would be age appropriate for a third grader, but also would challenge them from the reading level of somebody who is at a much higher reading level.
What resources are available for parents of gifted students?
Well, one of the best is the Indiana Association for the Gifted. They can be found online at iag.org. And the Indiana Association for the Gifted really tries to make sure that there are resources out there that parents can use and that schools can use to make sure that they're, again, encouraging these high ability students to excel at their highest level. It's really important to make sure that we challenge these students. If we don't, it can be detrimental to them later on because they'll just get used to the idea that they can skate by. We know that doesn't happen in life. So really trying to make sure that we're working with them helps build their self-esteem, helps make sure they're excelling, and sets them up for more success later in life.
If you don't like your school's curriculum, is there another option out there for high ability?
Well, that's always something that parents have to weigh as they're going through a school system. How is my school system doing? Is there a better option out there for my child? And one of the, in high school, actually, there is an option in Indiana. There's the Indiana Academy at Ball State University, which is a residential school for about 300 students from across the state who are able to go to the academy, and they benefit from the fact that often their courses are taught by college professors. So it's a challenging environment. The other good thing about that environment for these students is that all of the students in the Indiana Academy are high ability students. Oftentimes high ability students struggle socially because they are seen as different, and sometimes in the worst ways students can react to them even with bullying because a child achieves at a much higher level. Children who are not achieving at that level sometimes just struggle understanding that. So the one thing about working with students in high ability areas, not only with perhaps grouping them together in schools, but the Indiana Academy gives them the opportunity to learn with other learners who are at their same pace, understand the challenges that they go through with being a high ability learner, and that can make for a more comfortable environment for them so that they're focused on learning.